All right, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started so we can get you getting some food here soon. So I'm Steve Meyer. I'm the superintendent. I don't know. Some faces are pretty familiar. Some of you might be the first time you've met with me in a formal setting here. One thing we want to do is just sort of start off by going around the room tonight and just sort of so we know who all is here. So if we could start maybe at the high school council, if you just want to say who's here.
Hastings, principal, high school. It was a pretty quick this afternoon.
Yeah.
Rose Solar, school counseling.
Sharon Collins, inclusion teacher.
Shauna Hanson, parent.
Sam McGowan, student.
Chris McGowan, parent, and I'm the government representative.
Tim Tierney, small business.
Michelle Bull, parent. Jamie Cash, assistant principal. Judy Neves, small business. Wanda Rodriguez, parent. Caitlin McGrail, English teacher.
Mark Russell, parent. Christine Pearls, data specialist for Clinton Public School.
Amber Lemansky, grade 2 teacher.
Erin Mortimer, first grade teacher.
Beth McNally, elementary guidance counselor.
Christine Wagner, parent.
Rob Rule, principal.
I'm late.
And for middle school?
Sergeant, principal, middle school.
Bob Steve, assistant principal.
Melissa Maxwell, parent. Kelly Turcott, parent. Deb Bodak, parent.
Allison Alvarado, grade 4 teacher and parent.
Kate Warren, ESL teacher. Howard Jordan, fourth grade teacher. Lauren Kopecki, parent, and I'm a guidance counselor at the high school. Julia Hagenloser, grade 4 resource room teacher.
All right. And then we're joined by our school committee. You want to introduce yourselves?
Brendan Bailey, school committee. Gold Lake School.
And we have our business manager and our special ed director back there. And the item. And our student filmers. And now I think that's everybody. All right. So thank you for being here tonight. As we kind of sort of kick off the school council, you probably should have one meeting in September, hopefully, an initial meeting. I know a lot of times the tri-council meeting was held in September. We kind of wanted to wait a little bit this year because what we are going to talk about a little bit once you guys get your dinner is some of our MCAS data. There was some significant changes. Now it's the next generation MCAS. So give us an opportunity to kind of fill everyone in here. Remember, school council really has 3 jobs that it's charged with. The first one is the school improvement plans. The second one is the student handbooks. And the third one is to provide some budget input. Now, the budget input isn't usually huge budget input, but kind of as it relates to your school improvement plan. So if we're trying to develop a school improvement plan and setting those priorities, we need to make sure that we're budgeting accordingly to try to implement some of those. So all those are very important tasks, and they're tasks that we want to make sure that we're, you guys are well informed and that you're able to help us as we look to continue moving the district forward. I think the student handbooks is one, especially this year, that we'll try to work together as an admin team to kind of come up with a process so we can review those. I know kind of looking at some of our behavior expectations and trying to build some more consistency between the buildings is one of the things that we really want to do. And I know the next bullet on there said dinner, so I'm not too worried about it. We'll fix that. So in the meantime, what we'll do, I'll get you guys up. There's dinner in the other small conference room there. We can grab some dinner, come back, and you guys can sit and eat, and I will talk to you a little bit about a topic I know you can't wait for, but the next generation MCAS, all right? So I don't know, high school want to start since you helped set up the room? So the first thing we're going to do is an overview of the next generation MCAS and how that impacts the accountability results. That is actually going to be sort of it's a PowerPoint presentation. It's actually from the DESE, so I'll kind of go through their presentation, try to go quickly for the parts that don't mean as much to us, but I just wanted to share the whole thing so you could see it. We'll talk a little bit about what that means to our district's accountability, and then we'll go through in each school. We'll briefly review their strengths, areas of improvement, and next steps, and we'll talk about sort of what that means for the district. So hopefully the goal is at the end of this you have a better understanding for what the new assessment is like, what it's measuring, what the parent reports are going to look like, and sort of maybe some of the things that we are going to try to work on moving forward that you guys can then work on in your school council work. So in terms of accountability reporting, any school that did not give at least 90% participation would be placed in level 3. That does not apply to us. We had very good participation last year, almost 100% in every building, which was great. That's really the only part that kind of applies to us in this one. The key things here is that the second big bullet, all other next generation MCAS schools meeting participation and graduate requirements will not receive an accountability level, school percentile, or progress and performance index. So what that means is that basically Clinton Elementary School and Clinton Middle School, because they participated in the next generation MCAS, do not have an accountability level right now. And that last bullet basically says the 2017 assessment results will serve as a new baseline for target setting in 2018 and beyond. So because it's a significantly different test, what they're doing is they're basically resetting everything this year and treating this year as sort of a baseline year. The high school, because the high school still gave the old test, or what they're calling now the legacy MCAS, high schools still get their regular complement of things that are reported, their achievement, growth, and they're going to get their progress and performance index, and they'll still get a level, okay? And we'll talk about the high school's level a little bit later. And for the schools giving the next generation MCAS, like I said, the middle school and the elementary school, there is no level for our accountability and assistance level. It's no level. We'll still be able to get student growth percentiles, even though it's a new test. The way they do the percentiles, they look at your cohort group from test based on testing data the year before and how that same cohort group did on the new test. So even though they're different tests, they're still able to find that cohort group and then look at the percentiles and how they did. And that's basically about all for us on that slide. Going forward, like I mentioned, this year is really serving as a baseline year. So they're going to set additional targets for us to make progress. This year will serve as our baseline to set those targets, and that's something that we'll use this information to improve as we move forward. Consistent with the board's November 2015 vote, test scores from the spring 27 Next Gen MCAS in grades 3 through 8 will not negatively impact accountability results in 2018 and going forward. Okay, so they understood this was a new year, a new test, a lot of changes. So these 2017 results basically are just for our information purposes so that we can try to make improvements going forward. So this is where they came out with the data. So at 6 a.m. on Monday, October 16th, they released the data. So I was able to come into work and frantically start running a bunch of reports because I was crossing my fingers and sweating that they were actually going to release the data on time, because we had planned on our October 18th Professional Development Day looking at the data. So we needed to have it first. And they did come out, they did release it publicly on the 18th, and that was when we worked. We had a half-day professional development that day. We were able to have our departments and grade levels look at the data. And October 24th is when the parent and guardian reports are going to be coming. So I should receive those tomorrow. We'll see, what they come with, what kind of shape they're in, how we need to sort them, and then as soon as we can get them out, we'll get them out in a timely fashion. So what is the next generation MCAS? So the MCAS have been around for basically 20 years, and they created a totally different test designed around the new standards to focus on more of the rigor that's in the standards. And it says focus on students' critical thinking abilities, application of knowledge, the ability to make connections. It's supposed to give a more clear signal of readiness, and you'll see that in the descriptors in another slide or so. It's designed to be given on a computer. So that's kind of an important change. One of the examples I give, and I'll touch on this later, but in the past you might have a question on MCAS that says, in which answer are the numbers in the right order from lowest to highest? And they'd have to select A, B, C, D, or E. And now on the computer, the question says, just put these numbers in order. And you literally have to drag and drop the numbers. So because of that, the feedback you get on it's a little different as well. But that's part of the difference of being designed to be given on a computer. There's different things that you can do that's not just sort of a bubble. So computer-based testing, I mentioned that was one of the changes, is that now you have more options for how you're responding to these questions. They're not just multiple choice. It's not one number answers with just a few short answer or long composition ones. So in the computer-based testing, 60% of all students in grades 3 through 8 took the test on the computers. In Clinton, we took the test on computers in all those grades. 93% of grades 4 and 8, because 4 and 8 were required to be computer-based. So the 7% that didn't, it was either they had to get a waiver, or it could have been for students who might need that as a particular accommodation. And believe it or not, I know when I was out in Athol, we almost had to put in a waiver for Royalston because we didn't have enough bandwidth to test an entire grade at once. So then you'll see this year, more grades will be required. So grades 5 and 7 will also be required. And then by spring of 2019, all tests are supposed to be computer-based. And notice that it's also going to be for grade 10, ELA, and math. So essentially, they've started this sort of new testing format with the 8th graders now. 8th graders got to take the new test. So by the time those 8th graders or 10th graders, when they take the new test, it'll be the new test. So it should be hopefully something they're used to. One of the things you'll see the scale when we get to the parent reports a little bit, but obviously there's only, just like the other MCAS, there's only so many questions, right? So there's the 30 or 50 questions or 30 questions, 50 points that they can get. But then you get these scales. The old test, it was like 220 to 280. Now it's going to be 440 to 560. So there's some level of scaling that goes into all these tests and all these standardized tests so that they can adjust for different things. So they did that this year because there was some concern that the paper version of the test, students who had the paper version of the test appeared to score better than students on the computer version of the test. So there was some adjustments made to the scaled scores supposedly to counteract that, which is fine. I think one way to look at that could be that our students could have been at a disadvantage because they took the harder version of the test. I think we look at it the other way and we say that our students are now better prepared because they've taken the computer-based test an extra year, because it's not going to be an option down the road. So we've already, it's not going to be something new to them. It's not going to be a new wrinkle next year. So this month you'll get all the parent reports will come out for the next generation MCAS in grades 3 through 8 for English language arts and math, and the legacy MCAS, basically the old test, which is still grades 5 and 8 for science at the middle school, and then all the high school MCAS for English language arts, math, and the sciences. So what are you going to get? Well, there's achievement levels, the parent report, aggregate results. So they'll give you some comparison. These are the achievement levels. So this is the old one. So this is something that most of you are probably familiar with. You had the advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. And if you read them there, it's kind of vague, right? Proficient. Students at this level demonstrate a solid understanding of challenging subject matter and solve a wide variety of problems. So what they found was that even though in the old test there was a lot of students who were scoring proficient, that wasn't necessarily matching up to other indicators, such as readiness for college courses, such as the NAEP exam, those types of things. So what they wanted to do was create something that was a little more in line. So they came up with 4 categories again, but they tell you don't think they're just the same categories with new names. All right? So now you can see the way, if you look at meeting expectations, a student who performs at this level met grade level expectations and is academically on track to succeed in the current grade in this subject. So what they're trying to do is tie these a little bit more to the standards. So we have grade-specific standards that we should be teaching, and a student who's meeting expectations is able to demonstrate that they've mastered those standards. Partially meeting expectations, that means you're meeting some of those standards, but maybe not all of them. And then not meeting expectations, you're not meeting enough of them, okay? Now, one of the things that they wanted to make clear in this is that it's a higher expectation. That's part of the point of this, is that meeting expectations is a higher expectation than the old category of proficient. So there could be some, one of the big questions, which I think there's even a slide on it in a minute, that says, my kid got proficient last year and now they're partially meeting expectations. Why? And it's because it's a different test. So this is what the parent report will look like. It will be in color, and it goes from 440 to 560. So you can see basically if your score is over 500, you're either meeting or exceeding expectations. Under 500, partially meeting or not meeting expectations. And you'll see on the bottom, they'll give you some scores here, so you can compare your child's score to the school's overall score, to the district score, to the state score, okay? Typically, the school and the district for Clinton are going to be the same score, right? Because we have only one school at each grade level. Whereas a larger school, they're going to look at the school's individual score versus all the other schools. Sometimes there's a little variation because students who might be like an out-of-district placement but still count as a Clinton student who we factored in our district. But usually it's very minor. You also get this part, which kind of breaks it down by reporting categories, so you'd be able to see how your students scored in a specific standard or strand, and also you can see their answers. One big change is, if you can see these, which I don't know if you can, like question 16 here, it says you got 0 out of 1 point. It doesn't tell you what the incorrect answer was. So that was a big change with this test, because previously you could see what the incorrect answer was. So if we're looking at math MCAT results and we see that there's a particular question that students didn't do well on, we might say, okay, well 60% of the students got the correct answer, which was A, but 30% picked the same wrong answer, which was C. Why would 30% of our kids think it's C, not A? And you could try to dig into that. They're not reporting that anymore, and as I mentioned, it's because of the nature of the test. Because now they're not having you just select a single letter answer. It might be drag and dropping items or something like that. So they can't really tell you the order they dragged and dropped the items. So here's a question, right? Did my child scored proficient on the older MCAS, but only partially meeting expectations this year? So basically, they're saying that the meeting expectations for the new standards is more rigorous than the standard for reaching proficiency on the MCAS. And as I mentioned, that was part of the idea of redesigning the whole thing, was because they were finding that disconnect between proficient and then success in college and career. There is that does sort of say in the partially meeting, look closely where your child's score falls within the partially meeting category. If it isn't close to meeting expectations, talk with your children's teacher about how you can work together to help your child catch up. So that is one aspect they added in there, is to make sure we're looking at, what is it that we might need to do for those students who are partially meeting expectations to try to get them to meeting. And then just the reminder that it's a baseline year and not to compare it to previous year's scores. Okay, so they won't even, we have all kinds of little tools we can dig in and run all these reports, and they won't even let us compare MCAS to the next generation. It's like two totally different things, because they shouldn't be looking at the scores from one and comparing it to the other. So the idea, if you look at this is showing the breakdown of scores. So I know there was a lot of headlines on Wednesday when they released it that said things like 50% of the state meeting expectations. Well, I mentioned we have scaled scores, right? It was designed so that 50% of the kids are meeting expectations. So the way it works is 50% of the kids are meeting expectations or better. It's about 10% or so around there are exceeding. This group is in the partially, and then you're going to have that, less than 10% at the bottom that's not meeting expectations. The key thing I want to highlight on this graph, though, is the way they did it. You notice that the expectations are all kind of about the same. And we'll see how that differs. We'll see why they did that and how it differs from the old tests. So this is just some of the other things, all right? The results don't mean they learn less. It's just measuring it a different way. It's the new baseline year. And And this is just kind of talking about how in some tests, the percentage of students, meeting expectations actually went up, and in others it went down. And that was sort of a flaw in the old test. And the idea is roughly equivalent proportion of students in each grade. They want it to be roughly equivalent portions of students in each grade that are in each of those categories. It's that graph we showed before. And part of that is because these standards were set for all these tests at the same time. So one of the challenges they talked about was with the old MCAS test. If you remember, at one point it was like you only tested in grade, you took English in 7 and 10, and you took whatever, math in 8 and 10, or whatever, I forget even what the grades were. And then they slowly had to fill in the gaps. So while they had one existing set of tests, then they kind of created these ones in between. They didn't do it all at the same time. So part of what they wanted it to look like, they wanted it to look more like this distribution. Okay, so this is the NECAP testing, which is like a national achievement test that they give to kind of look at how different states are doing. And as you can see, according to the Massachusetts NECAP results, about 50% of the kids are meeting or exceeding expectations. So the test was designed to kind of reflect this same distribution. And like I said, although it looks like only 50% of the kids are meeting expectations, and although that looks like it's only 50% of the kids are meeting expectations, it was still #1 in the nation. Okay, so in terms of if you look at the NECAP testing across the nation, Massachusetts schools scored the best, or were tied for first with the number of students who were at proficient or advanced. So this is, remember that chart maybe 4 ago, that showed the new breakdown, and it was a nice line of 50 in the middle, roughly, and the 10 and the 10. This is what the old tests look like. So this is where it might not make any difference. You could be the exact same kid, and just because of the variances in the test, as you went from 4th grade to 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, your scores were going to be all over the place because the tests were so significantly different. So that's one thing that they've tried to improve with this next generation MCAS, this MCAS 2.0. All right? And then basically the DESE disclaimer is that we're always looking for areas for academic support, including non-academic barriers, and that we want to make sure that we're basically building in those social emotional learning components, which is a kind of a new focus. There are there's more resources on the DESE webpage. If you just go to the doe.mass.edu, it's actually going to be the first thing that pops up on their webpage right now is parent resources. And if you click on that, there's all kinds of different little FAQs and guides and that kind of stuff. So what does that mean for us? So as a district, Clinton Public Schools has no level as an accountability rating. Clinton High School is a level 2 school. It's, if you look at the percentile ranking for Clinton High School, it was in the 42nd percentile, which is an improvement. I believe last year was the 39th, 37th, I forget, one of the two. But it is an improvement over last year. Clinton Middle School and Clinton Elementary School will also have a ranking of no level, an accountability level of no level. I did just want to take a minute to show people this. So in a minute, we are going to go ahead and talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses that are areas for improvement that we looked at when we looked at the data, or we discovered when we looked at the data. I'm not going to drill into every single piece of data because there's so much of it. But almost all of this stuff is public. Okay, so the only thing you can't do is drill down to the point where you can see a kid's names. But you can see all the aggregate results now. So this is basically just the DESE, doe.mass.edu website for the DESE. And you can go to school profiles, and you can pull up Clinton, and then you can go through, and there's all of these reports. You can see a summary of how we scored in every test against the state. And there's even additional tabs over here to look at annual comparisons, student growth, results by subgroup, all that kind of stuff over here. So, like I said, I'm not going to go into all of this information in detail right now because, first of all, you'll all be sleeping now that you eat. But it's also going to, it varies based on your school council. But what I want, the important takeaway is to understand this data is there. So as you're looking at your work as a school council, and you're looking at school improvement plans, or you're looking at things you might think might be budget priorities or something like that, looking at this type of data might help you to identify certain areas of weakness. So as I mentioned, we had a professional development half day on Wednesday, October 18th, and our focus for that day was data analysis. So our department and our grade levels looked at some data packets we put together, and they had the information of how students scored based by subgroup, how they did by standard, and they had the test item analysis. They were even able to look at the item analysis to see, which questions we might have not done well on or that we did do well on, and you can click right on a link and it'll pop up the question for you if it's a released item, or at least a descriptor of the question, which is something they're trying to give us more information on those questions. It used to be there was a very limited amount for the younger grades that they released. Now they're trying to give us some more information on the ones at least that they're not releasing. And this is just sort of the beginning. This is the beginning of us looking at this data to try to process it and say, okay, where are strengths, where are areas for improvement? Our next step is going to be kind of a continuation of this when we have our half day on November 9th. And that's going to focus on writing objectives and lesson planning. So our idea is, once we've looked at some of these areas that we feel we need to focus on, we're going to be able to drill down, look at the question, try to understand what's the concept that students don't understand that they would have scored poorly on this question, so that then we can plan together as a department or a grade level to try to create either specific lessons and learning objectives to support that standard, okay? I never want to, I hate the term teach to the test, because that's something that, used to get talked about a lot, and I don't want us to teach to the test. But what we should be teaching are to the standards. So there is a curriculum framework, which is the standards that we're supposed to be teaching in each grade level. So that's the state kind of setting the rules. As long as we teach those standards, the test should take care of itself. But it's a matter of us drilling down to try to make sure, how are we teaching all those standards? And sometimes whatever program you're using, textbook you're using, might not necessarily hit them all the way that they're intended to be. A lot of those programs and stuff are written for more of a national level. So that's part of our work for November 9th. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hastings so he can review some of the strengths, areas of improvement, and next steps for Clinton High School. Yeah, I can do this for you.
So as Dr. Myers said last week, we had the half day of the early release day. And everyone was involved in data. The three areas of ELA, math, and science, obviously using the MCAT, and even the other areas of our other departments did a lot of data analysis as well. For the ELA, after looking at the MCAT, the 0 students scored in the field. In other words, everyone passed, which was really, really great. I know that's something that was supposed to be 2014 or something. As Mike Vetra said one night in 2014, if everyone doesn't pass, the world's going to end. But that didn't happen. So our students, 0 students scored in the failing area. 7 scores were in the needs improvement range. And the rest are proficient and advanced. So the majority were, obviously, a great majority were in those 2 areas. The differential between the school and the state on an overall possible point scored was a -2. So our department chair, Caitlin, is doing a great job of leadership there. The student scores 70% of all the possible points. So on the long compositions, we're equal with the whole state average. So right on the mark there. With the highest percentage of multiple choice questions with scores above the state average were on a paired reading selection of a familiar work of fiction, one of the summer reading texts that we assigned with the poem. So I don't know if there's anything you want to elaborate on that, but that seems to be pretty self-explanatory. Also, in the technology and the engineering, we're a little bit of a limbo there. We don't know what's going to happen with this MCAS-wise down the road, which I can talk about just when I wrap it up as far as the high school goes. But overall, 17% of students scored on the advanced level. That was, you know, that was okay. And this is the highest percentage in the history of technology test at CHS. In 2012, we were at 14%, so we went up a little.
Interject one thing on this stat. So I was looking at this, and I was looking at the page I just showed you on the website. And the page I just showed you on the website is going to say we had 3% advanced, okay? And I said, what's wrong with that? Why? And so I realized what they're doing is that summary page is showing you, it'll actually say grade 10 science. So what they're going to show you is the sophomores' science scores, even if they took them as freshmen, where this group that just came in is really our 9th grade. So these will be actually kind of show up on that page next year. So just so you don't say we're lying if you go home and look at that other page.
What we usually do is students coming in to Clinton High School as 9th graders will take the technology, engineering, the future class, and they take the MCAS at the end of the year as 9th graders, because they have obviously the English and math as sophomores, and we don't want them. Now, some students may transfer in, and they're probably coming to us, let's say, in October, November from another school, and they're already in biology. So instead of we give them the biology MCAS, or they've transferred to us as sophomores, they didn't have the technology. So we end up testing right now a small group of biology students in MCAS as well. But the main focus here at Clinton High School still is the 9th graders, technology and engineering. The student scores were in the second lowest percentage of needs improvement failing in the history of technology and engineering test at Clinton High School, with the 38% in this range. In 2011, we're at 34%. Students' open response questions scored 4% above the state average after being even with the state level in 2006. That's pretty good, being anywhere near the state level in any area of open response, especially writing in technology. That's good. Our math, I think we only had about 4. I think we had 4. One student left us. 4 who failed, and 1 already transferred out. So we're working on. We have 3 students in that math area. That's all that really we have to concentrate on. Students demonstrated strengths in the following areas: content area, knowledge of number system, interpreting graphs, lines of best fit and rate change, and arithmetic operations of polynomials. I got a math guy beside me, so I can't miss this one. Okay, and then Ed, you're watching me on this too, right? Clinton area, the area of improvements for the ELA. This is where we found the other word for weakness. Differential on open response scores between the school and the state was -6. Students scored 61% of the possible points on the open responses. And multiple choice questions that required students to go back to the text and reread specific sections of the text were some of the lowest scoring questions. So they analyzed that, they looked at that this past week, and it's something that they'll work on. And the highest percentage of multiple choice questions with scores below the state average were on a nonfiction test. So as Dr. Meyer mentioned, you can go right in there and see where you were not as strong as you'd like to be. Okay? And then areas of improvement for technology. Overall, 9% of the students failed, which is approaching the school high of 10% we had in 2010. The large number of open response questions were left blank. So we mentioned how well we did on it, but so many were left blank that they're working on in this area of how also to take the test and what to answer in the open response. And although we fall above the state average as a group on the open response questions, there is a weakness seen with all students attaining 4s. Okay. And then the math, students showed overall weakness in the following: factoring quadratics, multi-steps problems, and the area and volume problems, which they'll talk about here. Teachers plan to use, this is the ELA steps. Now that we know what we need to do, how will we do it? Teachers plan to use paired readings in their lessons and units. They plan to find poems and nonfiction articles for text that are part of the curriculum and share in meetings and or on Google Classroom, Team Drive. Team Drive has been created with folders for each grade, and one source for this is the website. What is that? Is that I got to ask you that.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Website is a resource with nonfiction articles, current event articles, and
Okay.
a wide range of topics.
Sorry, I forgot to ask you that. A resource for nonfiction articles, which can be differentiated for reading levels. The link of this site is posted on Google Classroom. So that would be one step that they will go towards. And then the ELA, they plan to incorporate more opportunities for close readings in their classrooms rather than trying to increase the quantity of text read. They will focus on the quality of reading. Students will be given chances to use higher levels of thinking for a more focused piece of the text. So require students to use text as a resource, develop habits of going back into a text. This responds to what we were saying earlier, where they had to go back and look at that and for reread almost. And then the EL department SMART goal. All the teachers have to have SMART goals, as we know that. Some of our departments did those as a department. The ELA department SMART goal is to improve student scores on the open responses. They plan to use the various strategies throughout the year to do this, including direct instruction and research-based reading strategies. Create resources with MCAS-based vocabulary and terms, analyzing strong and weak student samples of open response with their classes. Providing opportunities to practice this type of writing with the whole class text, self and peer revising, and editing based on the expectations for this type of writing. Open response is seen, on the ongoing basis with the department. And then technology, the teachers plan on working on the writing skills and techniques of the test, which will improve the open response scores of students. And this is also a SMART goal for the entire technology department as well. So all across the department, they'll be using that. Teachers plan, this is for the math, to address the sequencing model to reinforce the students' knowledge of factoring quadratics. This material will be covered earlier in Algebra 1 and then reviewed again in geometry. And teachers will focus on having students slow down during multiple step problems, read the entire problem, understand what is being asked. Students are often picking the answers after the first step and not continuing on to the second step. That was like my math days. And then students have a lack of understanding the relationship of area to volume. The problem becomes greater when it relates to proportions. Area and volume are covered briefly in Chapter 1 of Algebra 1, and the areas covered briefly in Chapter 1 of Geometry. The concept of volume is not seen until Chapter 12 of Geometry. So they're really looking at these steps here. Teachers plan to continue to address the sequencing problems and also consider that the formulas provided by the textbooks are different than the ones given on the MCAS formula sheet. So I asked them to explain that a little bit more. And what you're finding, and the math people will tell you, you do formulas and it may be one answer, but going at these, the steps may differ a bit in coming out with the, is that right? Am I right on this?
Yeah,
I
just
thought, yeah.
how to manipulate the formulas
But
more,
what
not
happens
just
is the
plug it in.
textbooks may differ even within the same book, Algebra 1, but different textbooks may vary. So in order not to be more on task and closer to what they're going to see, they use a lot of the same with the MCAS sample test to prepare for that as well. So that's what they're saying by that.
All right,
Okay?
I think that's it, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Marie, you want to come up and go over the middle school? All right, let me rephrase that. No.
Okay, as you can see, ELA for the middle school has always been a strength for us. If we look at
the ELA, the math, and the science and tech for grades 5 and 8. And overall, 84% in grade 4, 89 in grade 5, 90 in grade 6, 92 in grade 7, which grade 7 has always carried us, has always done well, and they're the ones that do a long composition. And grade 8 is 89%. They're meeting, exceeding, or partially meeting expectations in ELA. Some areas of strength, and again, as Dr. Meyer said and Mr. Hastings, our ELA department by grade level really tore into those MCAS scores last Wednesday as well. And we started to look at the question and say, what really did you need to know to answer the question? And then we broke it apart that way and came up with, these are the strengths that we had in ELA. And again, I'm going to thank grade 7 because a lot of it was them as well. Grade 6 came up a lot as well. So integration of knowledge and ideas, office purpose, theme when it comes to poetry, and the essay language for grade 7, conventions, writing a narrative that continued the story, analyzing the meaning of a phrase in a passage, use context to determine the meaning of a word, inferencing, and character development and setting. Math, we've always struggled as a middle school in math. We're constantly looking at new ways to meet the needs of the students. So 76% in grade 4, 75 in grade 5, 90% in grade 6, which was a huge jump for us for grade 6, so I'm pretty happy with that. 80% in grade 7, 85 in grade 8, again, exceeding, meeting, or partially meeting expectations. Strengths that we found, comparing fractions, equivalent fractions, division with remainders, sum of a 5-digit and 4-digit number, ordering decimals, decimal operations, and estimating. In science, again, science is the old legacy test, and this was a paper-based test. We were not computerized last year. We will be this year. So grade 5, 81%, 144 students tested. Grade 8, 86%, which was a jump for us, and 139 tested. Areas of strength, Earth's history, we had weather, forms of energy, properties of objects and materials, and then energy and living things, evolution and biodiversity, construction technologies. That would be part of our tech engineering class for grade 5 and 8 students, and engineering design was above the state by 2 to 8%, which was nice. So we do have some areas for improvement in ELA. Based on the language anchor standard, conventions of standard English and knowledge of the language, the reading anchor standard, key ideas and details, craft and structure, and writing anchor standard, text types and purposes. And this was across grades 4 through 8. We found a common theme there. No, sorry. So areas for improvement in math, in geometry. We found a lot to do with lines and angles and measuring, and then being able to classify by properties, two-dimensional figures, graphing points on the coordinate plane as it relates to the real world in mathematical problems, real world problems and mathematical problems using area, surface area, volume, and understanding and applying the Pythagorean theorem. And right now, science covers surface area and volume, so that's a nice addition with the new science textbook, so we're working on some of these things. Measurement and data, represent and interpret data. Expressions and equations, use properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions. Understand the connections between proportional relationships, lines and linear equations. And then functions, define, evaluate, and compare functions. Use functions to model relationship between quantities. Number and operations, fractions, being able to apply and extend their previous understandings, especially when it comes to multiplying and dividing with fractions. Operations and algebraic thinking, gain familiarity with factors and multiples, use the 4 operations with whole numbers to solve problems, analyze patterns and relationships, write and interpret numerical expressions, and then statistics and probability, summarize and describe distributions, investigate chance processes and develop, use and evaluate probability models. Then for science and tech engineering, areas that we would like to improve on, Under Earth and Space Science is rocks and properties, the water cycle and heat transfer. Under Tech Engineering, materials and tools, and engineering design. Although engineering design was a positive for us, there were some areas that when we broke apart the question, we feel that we can do a better job meeting those, so we included it for improvement. Life science, adaptation of living things, structures and functions, characteristics of plants and animals. And then under physical science, magnetic energy, electrical energy, and motions of objects. So our next steps. We this year have added the wind block, and it will be for grades 4 through 8, but because of the makeup of the middle school with the 5 grades, we can only implement it 1 grade at a time with a push-in team. So we are currently piloting the wind block in grade 6. We completed our first week, and we had a meeting today to discuss what did it look like, how well did it go, and how can we adjust it for the second week. We're providing remedial services for math and ELA during the day, continuing to use IXL. The middle school has an account for every student in grades 4 through 8 to use IXL. They can do it from home, they can do it in school using their Chromebooks. We've noticed that the curriculum that we aligned with our curriculum guides, we need to move things around, we need to adjust, because some of the things that we taught at the end of last year had more weight on the next gen test than we had thought from previous testing. So we're going to align the curriculum, moving things around in vertical alignment. Applied math in grades 4 and 5. So this is the first year we have a math teacher that is currently working with 4th and 5th graders in very, very small classes. So their math is in that class, not in the big regular ed class. Although the standards are still being taught, it's just at a different level, and it looks different. Title I in math and reading. Writing across the curriculum. Common planning time for communication about math and ELA skills. Look for ways to lower class sizes. I know that's a topic that's being discussed now with school committee. Look at special education programs. We want to try to get more of our students in an inclusive setting, so they're in those regular classes, getting acclimated to the standards, getting practice there, and then going back into a special ed class, smaller group setting, whichever works better, just reinforcing those skills, and of course, continue at department heads in math and ELA to provide support to staff.
I think that's it. All right,
See,
thank
pretty
you.
quick, huh?
All right, Mr. Rullo.
I feel like a cleanup guy.
That's why you were short and sweet.
No,
for
right,
yours,
it's why, that's what you said to me. Areas of improvement for their ELA. I'm pretty happy that according to the state scores, we're pretty relatively even with everybody else in there. But areas that we need to improve is essay writing and integration of knowledge and ideas. Talked to Alyssa Piermarini. They're really working very hard in those areas. So I think foundations, bringing down foundations is a large aspect to us. And I think in a couple of years we'll see some changes in there. Math, measurement, and data. Perimeter as an attribute to the playing figures. Understanding concepts of error and relate them to multiplication, addition, along with number and operations for fractions, again, in operations algebraic thinking. Sounds like middle school and us have a lot in common in those areas. Meg and I have just sat down and really kind of talked about the areas that are need be. And it's not that kids don't understand the concepts, it's we have to delve much more into the concepts and how they use them, not just the fact that they understand multiplication or division or addition, but how is it being used. That's what the test is really asking for. Under elementary next steps, again, having an understanding of multiplication as a student learning goal. As I just said, Meg and I just sat down today, really kind of going over these, continuing with our small assessments throughout the year. Please, the WIN block has started. It's being very successful. It's gone on to all the grades, and Meg is going into our, I believe, going into our 3rd week now, Meg, or second, just finished 2nd week?
We're rolling out
Week.
our first week of math. We started with ELA to sort of get the routine in place. We're rolling out math actually Wednesday.
All right, so we look forward to some changes in there. Our Title I staff is doing a lot of fast and frequent 15-minute intervals throughout the week as a second step intervention. This year we brought in a vertical common planning along with grade level common planning times to discuss ELA and math. We find that really well during our ELA times, during our common planning times. It's an opportunity for a lot of teaching to take place within there.
Again, Alyssa and Meg do a fabulous job. Alyssa as ELA and math, and Meg as the math department heads. And then we're getting a lot of in-house support from ELA and math department heads, as I said, along there. So we look forward, there's a lot of changes. We do have a lot to do in math. Okay in ELA, but we're getting there.
All right, thank you. All right, so as we just kind of bring it back together and talk about as a district what some of our next steps might be. So I wonder, there were goals that our school committee approved earlier this year. One is looking at expectations. This is a thorough review of policy, handbooks, contract negotiations, those types of things. That's the handbooks area, falls on, partly on you guys. It's a great opportunity for you to give us some feedback. Also working on communication, trying to make sure that we're getting information out to the community and to parents. We had 4 district goals besides the 2 school committee goals. One was educator evaluation. You heard a reference to SMART goals a couple times. SMART goals is one of the 5 steps of the educator evaluation process. We're working on trying to implement that process with a little more fidelity so that we can try to make sure that we're making some changes in the classroom. Well-structured lessons. And a lot of this comes back to that idea of focus, right? And it's not that we want to teach to the test, but we want to make sure we're teaching what we're supposed to be teaching. And we want to make sure that what we're doing has a clear objective that ties back to a standard, and make sure that we're able to do that. That'll be part of our next professional development day. Adjustments to practice, really getting an idea of meeting diverse needs by providing differentiation or interventions or enhancements. I think you're seeing some of that going on right now in the WIN block, and also even our day-to-day on the 18th, looking at the MCAS and trying to figure out what adjustments we need to make. And student engagement is our last goal, and really just trying to make sure that we're providing a safe learning environment and trying to get students to want to learn and want to come to school. One of the things that you'll be seeing, so I submitted a report of entry findings on October 10th, I believe, to the school committee. That's available on our website if you didn't see it. And I did highlight, I think there were 11 areas that I thought we should look at for improvement. And one of the things we'll actually be going over in our admin meeting tomorrow, which is a draft of a strategy for addressing those areas. And we'll probably be presenting that. I think it's on our school committee schedule for December. Because we want to try to make sure we present that strategy of what steps we're going to take moving forward, because we want to make sure that we can develop our FY19 budget to support that strategy. I know it seems like this year just got started, but it's like you have such a short window to try to make change, and we are right in that window right now, where we just figured out how last year wrapped up, and we're going to have a budget done in like 2 months. So in the next 2 months, there's a whole lot we've got to try to filter out and try to say, what do we want to be different next year? You know, I don't know exactly how it's all going to work out, but I do know we are going to try to talk about looking at ways to reduce class size at the middle school. We're probably also going to look at some ways to maybe provide some more instructional leadership to help support really what's going on in the classroom, and try to make sure that we're providing support to teachers on you know, how to make sure that they're implementing programs with fidelity, things like foundations, or how they're writing objectives and using different programs. So I know those will probably be some areas that you'll see some sort of impact on the budget in terms of how things are moved around. And that should also kind of feed into, as we outline this strategy, that district strategy will kind of feed into the school improvement plans. And you'll want to kind of look, as you're building your school improvement plan, on ways we can try to get the school improvement plan to sort of support the district strategy, but at the same time account for the needs of the individual building. So that's sort of that process. So thank you for serving on school councils. I appreciate everyone being here. I know it probably wasn't the most entertaining presentation that you've seen. There's not a whole lot of time left, but you can go ahead and use that time to get together and plan your work, unless anyone has any questions. If you have questions, I'll take them at this time. All right, thank you. Hope you had a good dinner, and feel free to plan your next meetings.